Welcome to the Catherine Vandome and Me podcast.
Hashtag hosts and the HQFM quiz and bingo software are proud to sponsor the Catherine Vandome and Me podcast. With HQFM quiz and bingo software, you can use this interactive quiz software at any venue. All you need is an internet connection. Go to hashtagquiz.co.uk for your free trial today.
Hello and welcome to Catherine Vandome and Me. I'm Catherine Vandome and I'm a stand-up comedian in recovery from very severe ME. I'm also a published author and my book is out now and it's called The Truth About Me. And it's all about entertainment and health, just like today's guest. And on that note, it gives me the greatest of pleasure to introduce onto the show today a gentleman who is a West End sound designer and also music producer at Studio 3507. It gives me the greatest of pleasure to introduce the brilliant Nick Sagar. Hello there, Nick. How are you?
Hello there, Cathy. Good morning.
Good morning and cheers to you at that side. How are you, Nick? How are you doing?
I'm very well. I'm slightly bleary this morning. It was a late night of sessions in the studio last night, so yeah, I'm breaking the day in slowly.
Bless you. Well, you are working extremely hard, and I know that I'm very lucky to get you onto today's show because you've just been traveling and touring around America. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was in New York for 9 days and then flew straight to Lisbon for 4 days there. Literally got off the plane, dumped my stuff at the hotel, and went straight to the theatre to do another show. So yeah, it's been a bit of a crazy couple of weeks, to be honest.
But great that you are in such high demand, Nick, which is only giving extra credence to why you're on this show today, because you are first and foremost a West End sound designer. Now, we've never had one of those on the show so far, so it is a real treat to have you on today. And can you just give us a little bit of information, Nick, before we talk about your studio, which is Studio 3507, based in Penwitham, in Lancashire? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've done? And I can't wait to hear all about you.
Yeah, I mean, starting at the very beginning, I was born and grew up in the northwest of Lancashire, well, northwest of England in Lancashire, in the 1960s, somewhere around there.
I doubt that.
Yeah, absolutely. In a pub. So, looking back, that was the thing I think that gave me my initial love of music. I was surrounded by music all the time. There was always music playing, at the speakers. We had bands playing and all that kind of stuff. So from a very early age, I was surrounded by music. Moving very quickly on to kind of my 18s, my college years, I ended up in drama school in London. So following a passion for kind of for theatre, as well as music and the sound and all those things that go together to make show and storytelling, actually, more importantly, storytelling. And I guess we'll go on to the link between the theatre and the songwriting and the music as basically being storytelling.
Fantastic. So you basically were sort of born into this career, and I can't wait to go back a little later on and hear more about how things progressed in your childhood into leading into this West End sound designer career. But just tell us a little bit more about the actual sound design, and before we then step by step go through how what you achieved.
So I was very, very lucky, well, because I was living in London, obviously, for 20 plus years. I was very lucky through happy coincidence and just being in the right place at the right time, really, to land my first job on Les Miserables
Wow.
in London. That was in 1990. So, I mean, that was, first of all, the pinnacle, really, of musical theatre in London at the time, and a huge trial by fire for me. Literally, I'd gone from nothing in musicals to the biggest show in town with a big cast, very prestigious, and I learnt very, very quickly, what it was like to to work on such a great show, such a demanding show, and that's where I kind of cut my teeth. Really, was on that show, and I still say to this day, anyone who's doing it back in the days of old-fashioned analog mixing consoles, not the new digital ones now that kind of help you breathe practically. But the old time ones that if you wanted to have to put 16 microphones up for the Paris scene, then you needed 16 fingers ideally.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Well, obviously, we're going to hear more about the actual intricacies, and you've got, I know, some brilliant stories that you share, that you have shared on other channels as well, that you basically are just so. What's the word? You are basically very, very slick and professional in your conduct and the way that you manage everything. And I think that this is precisely because you were working under such prestigious names such as Sir Cameron Mackintosh, Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber, and I think that again gives credence to your day to day, which is as a producer at your own studio. So just again, before we go back in time, just give us a little bit of a brief of that so that people can find you, and then we're going to remind them at the end how to get in contact with you directly, Nick.
Yeah, well, I mean, just going back very, very briefly, one of the things that you kind of struck on there about kind of professionalism is that the thing about doing theatre, doing sound, doing music, is fundamentally at the heart of it all is people.
Yeah.
Is the person, is the singer, is the artist, is the songwriter, whatever it is. And what I learned very early on, maybe I don't know whether I had it sort of naturally already, is that you know we are dealing with, or people in the sound world, people in the theatre world are dealing with something very, very precious and often very fragile in a person, in a performer, and it's our job to help and support and nurture that in some ways. And I think I learned very early on that ego in my job doesn't really work. Is that actually we're there to support either the performer or the piece or the song, and that we're all part of this massive machine together. I like to use the analogy of it being like a clockwork machine, is that you'll definitely get some cogs that are nice and huge and big, and they're the stars. And you'll get some tiny little cogs who might be the people who clean the auditorium after all the popcorn's gone all over the floor. But actually, you take one of those cogs out of that machine, and the machine stops working.
I like that analogy.
So
Yeah.
it doesn't matter how big or small you are in the world of theatre and of creative arts, and I guess in a lot of other organisations as well, is it's easy to see the big cogs and easy to think that's what makes it all tick. But actually, it's a unified approach. It's everybody working together in harmony and supporting each other. And I guess I learned that very early on in my career, and that's something I like to think has kind of served me well as I've gone on. I think I'm hopefully regarded as someone who is, like you say, very professional, but also very supportive. I can be quite demanding at times in the sense that, I'm passionate about getting the best out of people, even when they don't necessarily think they can take, another step further. And I like to help them kind of take that extra step. So that's what I've kind of taken into the studio world as well. 3507 studio recording, 3507.co.uk for anyone who's vaguely interested. But yeah, I've got a presence obviously online on Insta. I do a lot of stuff on Insta now, which is a whole new ball game for me. I mean, being in front of the camera, the nice thing about being a kind of sound engineer and music producer is that you can kind of stay out of the spotlight quite a lot. It's nice and easy to sit at the back of the auditorium in the dark, and everyone's looking in the opposite direction. But
But you know what? Like the gladiators in pantomime, sometimes some of you that are taking the lead roles have actually got the huge amount of talent as well. And I've seen you in front of the camera, not to compare you to a gladiator unless you wish to be compared.
my dreams, I like to think of myself as the same, to be fair.
But the main thing is that you really do, the brilliant thing about you, Nick, and I have seen you presenting as well, is you do have that skill set. So you've got the whole package, really. You've got the whole montage of being able to do all the production work, the sound design, the lighting, all of those components that go towards putting any production together. but also in terms of producing with the leading artists from all over the world. International artists are flying over to Lancashire to work with you, Nick, because of the fantastic historical backdrop of a career that you've had, as I said, particularly in the West End of London, which is every man's dream. So I'm so proud of what you've achieved, and I can't wait to share with everybody what you have achieved. And just tell me a little bit, I love your passion. Just tell me a little bit about the studio itself, what you provide at Studio 3507 that perhaps may be a little different to other studios.
Well, to give you a little bit of history, the studio existed really as a little workshop, a little personal workshop for me when I was doing my theatre sound design work, doing small music projects. I write myself, so it was a space to be able to do that. And then March the 17th, 2020 came along, and a certain thing called lockdown started happening. And our esteemed Prime Minister at the time made an announcement to say that he recommended that people don't go to theatres and don't go to restaurants. And at the time, I was rehearsing for a theatre show down in London, and we were literally 4 or 5 days away from leaving the rehearsal room and about to go into the theatre to start the technical rehearsals for the next
Really?
stage of putting on
Oh,
the show. And the producer looked around the room and said, "Well, that's kind of we're a bit stuffed then, aren't we? People, because people aren't going to be coming to theatres. So everyone go home. We'll get in touch as and when we have a clearer idea and plan what's going on." Anyway, long story short, I got back home, walked into the studio and thought, well, I'm never going to get a month off again, because I had a packed diary. So I looked around the studio and thought, well, great, I can do some maintenance and I can do bits and pieces and blah, blah. Anyway, as we all know, that 1 month turned into 3 months, turned into 6 months, turned into 2 years. So I very early on decided that, well, the future of theatre was very, very, very uncertain. And I thought, well, I have this space. For some crazy reason, studios could stay open during this time. You couldn't put 400 people into a football stadium, but you could put four sweaty blokes into a recording studio. Yeah.
four women, four sweaty women as well.
And all four sweaty women. They don't sweat, do they? No. You introduced me as a gentleman. I couldn't possibly say.
I can say.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, equal. And anyone's allowed to sweat. So I thought, right, okay, let's make this, let's open this space up to other people who no doubt also are kind of twiddling the thumbs thinking, what's the future got to hold? And so many people started picking up guitars or putting pen to paper and writing. And consequently, we had so many people coming into the studio just expressing themselves, often for the first time.
Wow.
I had quite a few people who not really picked up a guitar either ever or not for a long time because their work and their life and everything had gone in the way. And all of a sudden, lockdown and COVID kind of put a halt on all those things. And they were able to kind of, pick up the guitar or start making music again. And what the studio became was a huge outlet for that. I mean, we had to be very careful. Obviously, there was a lot of mask wearing. The number of times when the singer would go into the booth and start, take your mask off. And I had to put airflow into it. All the guitar strings got rusty because I had to sterilize those after every session.
Really?
So there's a lot of work before and after, but to remain safe, so that people could make music in a creative way, but also in a very safe way as well. And so consequently, not only for the artist, but for myself, it kept me creative.
Yeah.
It kept me sane, for want of a better word. And it kept a bit of money coming in and all that. But what I realized is that as much as I love my theatre work, it was kind of like going full circle because I got into theatre from music.
Right. Well, I'm going to pause you
I love
there
it.
because that's really, really interesting. So you are saying that you started with music, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Then you went and progressed down into London and did all the sound design, technical side of things. And then, as you say, you've come full circle back into Studio 3507, and of course, producing some fantastic work with multiple international artists, which is incredible. And we're going to hear more about that as well. So, what I want to know is, with your permission, Nick, can we go back in time to the very beginning? Because I want to hear about what and how you started your career in music, how it led to London, and then how it led to what you're doing today. So, going right back, if we may, if you share with us who your parents are, what their names are, where you were born, and just start us from the very beginning and share any little stories that you may have from your childhood.
Certainly. So my dad, Peter Sagar, sadly no longer with us. He died 22 years ago. But he's from Lancashire in the UK and met my mother, who was from Germany. My mum was over in the UK as part of her 3 years. She was studying English, French, and German. And the plan was she spent first year in England, second year in France, third year back in Germany, finalising her degree. Anyway, she came to England, she met my father, and then didn't make it to France and back to Germany. So,
Oh, so
um,
proper
so
love
proper
story,
love, yeah,
Nick.
proper love.
And sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Ja, natürlich, ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch. Ja, also ein bisschen, ja, ja, echt viel. Anyway, that's going to be
Kleine.
useless to anybody else who doesn't speak German. Um, so I always felt kind of very lucky and almost very privileged because I kind of grew up in what I regarded as a slightly exotic environment. So not only having kind of an international parent or a European parent, but also in a pub. So it was like growing up in a massive house that, a lot of people tended to come to. But, I had a huge kind of playground to play in, and surrounded by all these different influences and most notably music.
Wow.
Um,
And just remind me where that was again, Nick, because the
in
history to that
Charlton, which
place.
is in the northwest, on the northwest coast, 10 miles from a place called Southport, which is where my mother and father first met. And actually now is only about 10 miles from where I now live, having moved back from London. So very happy childhood, growing up in this, great huge house, surrounded by music and surrounded by bands. And I used to, I think probably the age of 6, 7, where we lived, there was an old stone kind of semicircular staircase, and my bedroom was above the pub effectively because we were living above the pub. So I would, when the bands were playing, I would sneak out and kind of sit halfway down the stairs, so just out of sight of the rest of the pub, and I'd listen to the bands who were effectively at the bottom of the stairs and the music coming up this kind of passageway of a staircase, and listen to this music, kind of mesmerized, just thinking that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
You know, I want to be a pop star. I want to be a rock star, or at least I want to be able to play guitar. You know. Anyway, I started learning guitar at primary school, and I was told I was rubbish and I'd never be able to play guitar. So I kind of kind of gave that up until the age of 11, when a good school friend phoned me up and said, I found these two records in my mum and dad's record collection. One's called Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and one's called Let It Be. Why don't you cycle over and we'll have a listen to them because I think they're great. So I cycled over and we listened to these records, and it was like this
Wow.
epiphany. Especially anyone who knows Sergeant Pepper's, it's kind of a whole world in sound, and it was very innovative in the way that the sound music was produced and the sonic world it created. And I think that was the first seed for me of thinking there's a whole world in this sound lark. And I want to, be someone who creates worlds like that for people to listen to. Anyway, we started playing along with Beatle records with tennis rackets in his front room.
What
And
you're
we were
saying
very
about the
good.
tennis rackets, but for anybody that's watching that's not of our generation,
Yeah,
those tennis rackets were wooden. I think I've still got mine
yeah, 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 yeah.
with strings on that
Yeah.
literally were like
So were
strings.
guitars, ironically. They're
Yeah,
wooden
they
with
were
strings
little
on. So
guitars when you
it
were
was the
little.
perfect start. It was the
Yeah.
perfect start.
And
So
you
we,
had, am I right that there was other people coming into the pub in the history of you growing up, Nick, before you
yeah,
went
it
to
was it
yours?
was a bit of a destination place because it had a fantastic restaurant to start
What
with.
was it called, Nick?
The Ram's Head. It's now a Lidl. So unfortunately, it's now a Lidl. It lay derelict for many years. I had these fantastic fantasies of buying it and turning it into kind of an art center and music recording studio.
Nick, you
Anyway, it
still
never happened.
can, you just need a trolley.
Absolutely. It might be a little noisier. But
But growing up, tell us about that.
yeah, so growing up was great, and again, it was a lot of music. I studied nearby. I studied in a place called Hutton Grammar School, so a very
Yes.
very themed all boys school. I think I was one of those pupils that if I'd actually put more of my mind to it, I could have probably been very good academically, but I couldn't really be bothered because I was playing music, I was doing that kind of thing. So I kind of got by. I was one of those lucky people who didn't have to try too hard to get by. But much to my parents' chagrin, that if I'd just done that little bit more, I could have maybe gone to Oxford and Cambridge. But pff, who wants that? So I'd much rather be playing guitar than, than going to Oxford or Cambridge. So
But
as I say,
what I heard you say earlier was that you just tell us about the people that perhaps came through the doors and that you
yeah.
shared time with, because that's
So
really
we had a real mix actually, because it was a bit of a destination, and because my parents had friends who were in Southport, a gay couple. They can any time that any of the celebrities went to Southport for the summer season, they would always get together with Brian and Graham, as they were called, and Brian and Graham would always bring them to the pub because the food was fantastic. And it was in the days when pubs would close at 2 o'clock and then reopen again at 7. So like Sunday afternoons were great. So we'd close the pub and we'd have this massive table surrounded by celebrities of the time, the John Inmans and the Larry Graysons and the Danny LaRue's and all these kind of stuff.
wow.
And we'd be playing charades, and all the grown-ups would be drinking, and my sister and I'd be running around and playing, joining in charades. But we were kind of exposed to people that we'd seen on telly, and it was the absolute norm. For us, it was like, oh well, there's John and there's Larry and there's Danny and there's all these people. So I think from an early age, that whole idea of kind of celebrity slightly was demystified for me,
Yes.
which I think helped going on into the future. And also that notion of there's big cogs and the small cogs, but we're all part of the same machine. I grew up with people that everyone else saw on the telly, and that was it was kind of, it was a bit mad. That, and also we had footballers, because we were kind of on the route between Southport and Liverpool, so a few of the old Liverpool players used to come and stay, not stay, but to have a drink again in the days when footballers would have a match and then they'd come back and have a few pints and then go home, as opposed to now where they're elite athletes, of course.
Yes.
So it was a very happy place to kind of grow up, and a real kind of melting pot of inspiration and characters and people. Not just the celebrities, the regulars who came in were real characters as well. And so, it was a great place to grow up. And as I say, that kind of nurtured also slightly my wanderlust for a bigger world.
Yes.
I was very lucky that I didn't necessarily grow up in a parochial kind of sense, even though it was in a small village. I always felt like the world was a bigger place, maybe because of these celebrities and these footballers and these people who are kind of outside normal life, if you like. I think that nurtured and also having a German mother. So, we'd go to Europe every year, twice a year, whatever. So that was a huge influence on my life as well, not just the kind of English small village thing. Nothing that there's anything wrong with that, but seeing that there was a bigger world out there.
So
And so
what you're saying is you've got obviously, the fantastic sort of music backdrop of the Ramshead pub that you're living in and growing up in, and you've got a German mother who is showing you that there's a world out there, and lots of travel, and then you've got all these highly esteemed Larry Grayson, and who else did you say was coming through the door?
Danny LaRue, John Inman from Are You Being Served? So I mean, great characters, great
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're sharing your home, if you like, with these people. So not only are they on the television for most of us,
Yeah.
but you've got the privilege of these outside characters coming right through your very front door, effectively. And have you got any siblings at all, Nick?
Yeah, I've got a sister who still lives in the area. She does something completely different from me. She's a civil servant.
Okay.
So yeah, I think as far as the Wanderlust is concerned, I was the member of the family that kind of fled the roost and went off and did all that. And I think sometimes she's slightly envious, and other times she just thinks, no, I'm very happy just being here. A lovely house and a lovely life and all that kind of stuff. So
She had the security, because the
yeah,
important thing to share on this channel as an entertainer myself as well is it can be a very insecure roller coaster of a world. Things don't just happen the way we see them on the television, and indeed, even for the celebrities, they don't just walk into those those positions, they've done a heck of a lot of work prior to and within that time. And in order to sustain those careers, and even when you make it big time, you've then got to be able to sustain that career. So for you personally, you went off, am I right? Did you go to drama college or
Yeah, I went
college?
to London. Oh, first of all, I went to college in Preston, and studied performance arts, performance music, and theatre studies at A level.
Was
Um,
that Preston College?
I was Preston, what is now Preston College. It was
Right, you
called
did exactly what
College.
I did.
Yeah,
That's perfect. And then
yeah.
after that, then you went, did you say to drama
And
school?
then I kind of went to drama school. To be honest, I think I kind of fell into that because, other people that were on the course with me, well, a couple of good friends, were going down to drama school in London, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I just thought, well, that seems like a good idea. That seems like a bit of fun. So I applied, and crazily, I got in on the stage management and technical theatre side of
Which
it.
drama school was that, Nick?
Mount View, Mount View Theatre School in North
Wow.
London.
So you went to Mount View, which was one of the highly accredited drama schools of its time, and assumedly today as well. And one of the top ones, I mean, in the country, which is brilliant. And you went on just remind us what you did,
I
sound
did
and,
I did the stage management and technical theatre course. So that
oh,
covered
stage management and tech.
tech.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that covered everything from set design through to sound, lighting, props, stage management, all the aspects of the, if you like, behind the scenes side of theatre. And to be honest, at drama school, I kind of specialised in set design. I kind of had a bit of a flair for that. I did little bits of sound and bits of lighting as well, but it was set design. And again, creating worlds, creating spaces for people to exist in. Going back to the Sergeant Pepper's thing, it's a similar thing, but it was just in a visual sense rather than a sonic
Yeah.
sense. So 2 fantastic years in drama school.
And what did you learn before we move on to the next bit? What did you actually learn from Mount View to encourage anybody coming up the ranks who wants to follow in your steps? Because we've had a lot of artists that, as you say, are centre stage, front of stage, including myself. But what you're saying is behind the scenes are these absolutely incredible designers, set producers, and you're having a taster, if you like, at Mount View of all of the components within. Is that right? And just tell
Yeah.
me which, what you learned from Mount View if anybody wants to go.
Again, I think realizing that you are part of a team, that no one has to do it all on their own. And I have to remind this of myself sometimes. If I get a script and I'm looking through a script and thinking, oh crikey, I need to do this and that and the other, and how are we going to achieve this scene? And then I've got to remind myself, hang on a second, I don't need to do everything. There'll be a set, there'll be a lighting design, there'll be, actors, there'll be a director and all that. And theatre and all the creative arts really is a team. And
Yes.
I learned that very much at Mount View, to know that, we're all there to support the play or the piece or the musical or the song as it is now. And we've all got a role to play. None of us have to do that at 100%. Maybe the director to an extent, but the director also relies on input from the various different members of the creative team, the set designer, the sound designer, the lighting designer, because they don't know everything either. They're all sitting there going, "What am I going to do? How am I going to do this?"
Yeah, it's
And I
not. I
realized
want to
that
say.
again.
I want to say it's not just the actors who are at the front, nervous with the lines or whatever. Actually, what you're sharing today is that the people on the sound desk or behind the scenes, they're equally nervous because everything depends, as you said, on a circle of or a clock, which I love the same
Yeah.
circle analogy there of a clock face with all of the cogs working together. And I love that analogy, Nick. That's a beautiful analogy of how it works and ticks along quite
Yeah,
literally.
ultimately, we're all winging it.
Yeah,
Ultimately,
absolutely.
that's what from the start, we're all winging it, and the process of theatre particularly is going from everybody winging it to everyone winging it slightly less because they know what they're doing, to slightly less, until hopefully we get in front of an audience and we're no longer winging it. We kind of know what we're doing.
Yes.
There's also times when we're winging it at that point as well. But
Oh,
it's
I think I'll be winging it for life.
that process of people not feeling that they have to go in knowing everything. And
Yes.
I remember very early on, it was in Les Mis actually. I was the third in a sound team of three, and we were trying to solve a problem, and I was coming up with all these solutions and this, that, and the other, and kind of going slightly crazy with it. And my head of department stopped me and said, "Nick, it's okay to say I don't know, don't you?" And I was trying to be this problem solver and do all this, and actually was saying it's okay to say I don't know. It's okay not to know everything,
Oh,
at the beginning. It's a process of discovery and finding out and doing all that kind of stuff. So to anybody out there who wants to get into the kind of creative arts but feels that they're not capable, or they're not good enough yet, none of us are. None of us are at the beginning of any project. We're not, whether that's a particular show or whether that's a career or whatever, none of us are as good as we would like to be at that point.
yes.
The process and the joy of doing it is going from where you are now, where you start, to closer to where you ultimately want to be. You may never get there, but it's not necessarily about the destination, it's about the journey.
I
And I
love
think I've
that. I
learned
love
that.
that phrase because so many people coming up the ranks, they start off as, for example, as a vocalist or a dancer or a performer or behind the scenes, and they almost envisage themselves too quickly doing that performance or stand-up comedy, and they think, "Oh my goodness, I'm not as good as X. How can I get to that point?" But what you're saying is, to be honest, if you let go and let the process evolve, and don't be so worried, would be my advice as well. Don't be worried about what everybody else thinks, because we're all thinking the same. All human beings are very similar minded, and you kind of learn that through the process of, particularly when I studied therapy and counseling, you'd kind of learn that we're all very similar. And once you accept and appreciate that, then you're no longer sort of beating yourself up for trying to be perfect, as you say, first time or even the 100th time. It's a learning process, and try not to worry too much what others think. What would your advice be, Nick?
Well, I think perfect is a really difficult thing to define, because I think quite often we define perfect in relation to somebody else,
Yes.
someone that we admire, or we respect or whatever, and so we think that their level of achievement is a level of perfection. But what I've learned is, and particularly working with music artists, is that actually what's more important is about individual style.
Yes.
So, because if you try and attain that person's perfection, they've already done it. It's already out there. Someone's already done it. They've kind of beaten you to it. You know what I mean?
I
They're
like
already
that.
doing it really well. And if you know them well, if they're, famous or celebrity, or they've reached that level, they're kind of already nailing it, and they're out there doing it. So what's the point of doing what they're doing? Because the chances are they've got a head start, they've got more resources, they've got all that kind of stuff. So why not try and do something else that comes from you, rather than emulating them?
I
And I,
like that, so that you're basically thinking about your process. And when you do that, it becomes a more internal process. That's something that
yeah.
I've learned over these last years. So when
Mhm.
you are then sort of lighting up your own life and following your own hopes and dreams, not trying to be like anybody else, because there's only one of you, I will say to everybody today, you are unique, you're beautiful and perfect in your own way, and you don't have to be like anybody else, and you don't have to be liked by everybody else. Just follow your own hopes and dreams. Would you agree with that?
Indeed, yeah. I mean, if Picasso had looked at Monet and gone, "Oh, he's really good. He's I need to be more like that," we would never have Picasso.
Yeah, I love that.
And Billie Eilish, for example, if Billie Eilish had looked around and said, "Yes, Amy Winehouse is fantastic. I want to do that," we would never have Billie Eilish.
Yes,
So it's
yes.
about having confidence enough to go, you know what? I'm just going to do the thing that speaks from me, and I'm going to hone that to a point where I can say, yes, that's me. Whether people like it or not is kind of immaterial, and it's easy for me to say, I guess, who's had a relative amount of success from doing it. But I think the most of my success has actually come, ironically, when I've cared less about what other people think about what I do, and it becomes from yourself, from your heart, from your own internal passion, and I think that ultimately attracts people, because you become your own shining light.
Yes, and I like that analogy because I was always a bundle of adrenaline in my career, and I would look around the audience. I discussed this with other artists, and I would see an old lady get up, and all she's doing is going to the toilet, for example, and leaving the room. But instead of thinking, well, 99 people are enjoying it, and she's just actually having a moment because she's elderly,
Yeah. Yeah.
I would
She's not a critic.
exactly, or she might have been in
A,
disguise
mu- a bladder
uh,
might have been,
with
but
a bingo dabber.
yeah, yeah.
But what I mean is, instead of, and we all do it as artists, whether we're front or behind the scene, and I was constantly sort of engaged in, which is, you've got a frenetic brain when you're on stage. You're thinking of the light in the sound, especially if you're operating it yourself, and then you're also trying to appease the audience, which is what performance is. Please love me, everybody. And I think when you're in that mindset, which tends to be a younger mindset, sometimes that can be a barricade, I feel, to building your own self-worth, which is all part and parcel of performance and working in the industry. And that's something I want to discuss with you also, because I think while ever you are feeling not good enough and you're analysing the old lady, then you're going to forget your next line.
Plus, you're not in the moment anymore.
Exactly. You're not living it, you're not enjoying it, you're not breathing properly, and you're not enjoying the whole process and what you've just described, the journey, even the journey of the one show that you're doing. So it's being and living in the moment. I love that phrase. And, what's your feelings behind your own character? You were describing Mount View because that's what drama school does. It breaks us down, builds us back up again, prepares us for the West End, the knockbacks, the highs and the lows. And you were told, like myself, I guess, it doesn't have to be perfect first times, because we are both perfectionists, I would say, which is great for your work ethic, but actually sometimes not good for your own psychological welfare. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. One of the things that we also have to go through a lot of the time is, even if we do overcome those insecurities about it all, once you get to a point you go, actually, I'm doing okay here, then you suddenly find yourself around a table around other people who are at the pinnacle of their careers, and you go, I shouldn't be here. That imposter syndrome kicks in
Yes.
as well, and so it becomes a bit of a vicious circle, and you kind of go, well, will I ever feel comfortable? And the real answer to that is, I don't know whether there's ever a point when you can say, yes, I am happy, I'm good at this, I'm respected within, amongst my peers and all this kind of stuff, because the moment that happens, you kind of go, yeah, but how long will it last?
Well, do you know, that's really interesting. That's a really interesting point, because Eric Morecambe said exactly that when he was at the top of his career. He was my personal idol, and I'll ask who yours are in a second as well. And he actually said that at the pinnacle, we are now number one on the Christmas charts and all the rest of it, with Eric and Ernie, Morecambe and Wise. And he said the only way from here now is down. And that kind of was, if you like that, I think that resonates with many, many artists in this industry, particularly in entertainment, because you are putting yourself up on a platform to be knocked down. At the end of the day, it's very easy to be behind a screen typing away criticisms or a critique in the audience of said production. But it's very, very hard to put yourself out there and then get back up again, particularly with the highs and lows of our own personal lives and grievances that we go through and trials. So, what would your advice be to anybody coming up the ranks to maintain their own mental welfare in accordance with the work that you've been doing, Nick?
I think, again, if you are put all your efforts into your own passion, your own belief, your own style, what you want to say, the person you want to be ultimately. The thing about any of the creative arts really is it's vocational.
Yeah,
So, we kind of do it because we have to do it, because doing another job wouldn't quite fulfill us in the same way.
no.
So there's a bit of a price to pay for being vocational. Ask any nurse. Any nurse will say that it's a long way from being the ideal job, but there is a love and a passion for doing it, which makes them put up with all the extra stuff that is
Absolutely.
less than
Yeah,
easy, and a struggle. And
yeah,
I
yeah,
think it's true for anyone in the creative arts as well, is that, yes, in any walk of life, in any job, there are difficulties.
yeah,
But I think if you make the lighthouse of success, your own passion, your own individuality, then that is something that will always steer you through all those troubled waters. So you have to learn to have a thick skin, because there are always going to be people out there that say, "No, you're rubbish. You shouldn't be there," and blah blah. And if you've set your standards by somebody else's, and you're comparing your successes to them, then it's very easy to have that knocked, because you're already kind of working on something tenuous. Whereas if you're going, actually, this is what I want to say, this is who I want to be as an artist or as a creative, and you just stick to the courage of that conviction, then yeah, those people can say things and it might give you a knock, but you're heading.
Yes.
You're heading towards or away from that lighthouse, whichever the analogy is. Uh, but you can see the beacon and you can see the way forward. I'm not saying that makes it totally easy. Part of being in the creative arts is about difficulty as well, and
Yeah.
that we learn and we write and we create out of those difficulties. But if we set our own standards for ourselves, based on ourselves, then I think we can become less susceptible to the knocks that
I
others.
like that because, and this channel's all about entertainment and health. And I like what you've shared, Nick, because it doesn't just transcend the entertainment industry, it transcends any work, as you explained with the nursing careers and things like that. So it's a case of following your dreams and goals, whatever those personal dreams and goals are, shaping your character. Believing in yourself and perhaps ignoring anything outside that is toxic in any way, shape, or form that is putting you down and narrowing your beliefs. Because those, as you say, will often be people who don't have high aspirations and therefore they're quite happy just living a sedentary life and potentially some of those people very happy to critique others but not got the confidence or wherewithal to do it themselves. Would you agree?
Yeah, I released a song recently with an artist near Just George called Dear Haters. And the song was a reaction to some of the toxic, vile comments that she gets
Oh,
on social media. I mean, she's fantastic. She's one of the hardest working people in the music industry at this level where she is. She's constantly making music, constantly out gigging, doing all this stuff. But because she is very exposed on social media, she does a lot on TikTok, that also exposes her to the more toxic side of people who clearly aren't doing anything themselves. They're just like criticizing. And the song is about, it's fine to criticize me, but what are you doing? Show me what you can do. Oh, right,
having
nothing.
your
Right.
cornflakes
Yeah,
and just typing.
absolutely. So, it's fine. You can critique,
Yeah.
but let's show us what you can do better. If you're saying that I'm rubbish, how are you better?
Good, I like that. And what's her name again, this artist?
Just George, Giorge, just George.
Just
And the song's
George.
called Dear Haters. It's on Spotify.
Wow.
But it was intended as a bit of a response, so that rather than getting back into that kind of tit for tat shouting match on social media, she can just put a clip on and just go, there you go, that'll do. You
I
know,
love that. And actually, that's something that I'm glad you've raised because obviously advanced technology, etc., is excellent for today's Zoom, but not very good for unfortunately for interactions where, there are a lot of bots, of course, on socials, and there's a lot of people today on socials that are very happy to criticize, and it can be a fantastic tool for today's meeting, but it's not very good for interactions that are of a negative position. So I've learned over the years to, when somebody does say something unkind, and it's happened of late, I try and kill with kindness. And they can't really go anywhere from there. So I always say, for example, well, I look forward to reading your book and I hope you have a great day. And there's nowhere they can go. So it's learning, if you like, to
yeah, fair enough.
shut
Yeah,
down the hate. And what I'm learning is these people who are doing this, and sadly there is quite a lot, they've obviously, as I've said before in many podcasts, hurt people. So if people are critiquing you in a very negative way, and it does happen to the health experts I've spoken with, as well as the entertainers and everybody, can happen to us all, particularly if we put ourselves up in a position of a firing line, as I've said before. So how would you manage criticism yourself, Nick?
Um, of course, my initial reaction is to want to just get into a slanging match with them. That's my
I think that's the
knee-jerk
man. I
reaction.
think that's the
I don't
man.
do that. I don't do that because I know where that leads. I know where that can go,
Right. Yeah.
and all you're doing is poking the bear effectively
You're
when you're
feeding them, and they want
yeah.
that, it
Because
seems.
ultimately, these are people who are shouting from the shoulders of giants. Basically, that's all they're doing.
Yeah.
Because they're ultimately very small potentially within themselves, and so they need the likes of the people who have got more exposure to stand on the shoulders of and shout from.
Yeah.
So the first thing I always remind myself is that if this person who is a complete stranger is commenting, whether positively or negatively, on something that I've posted or I'm doing, they must have found me from somewhere. They
Yeah.
must have been sufficiently interested and
Yes.
intrigued
Yeah.
to want to bother to comment, whether that's positively or negatively, which means that I must be doing something right to be visible in the first place.
That's brilliant.
So that's the first thing I do. The second thing I think is that a lot of people are incapable or haven't found a way of creating or developing themselves or finding that inner passion and doing something with it. So it's very easy to criticize what they don't like rather than do what they do like.
Yes.
So I like to think sometimes maybe it's a first step towards them doing something themselves. Probably unlikely, but there will always be hate. There will always be vitriol because, it is so easy just to make a comment online to think you're clever, but it's about giving themselves exposure. And if I comment back, all I'm doing is just giving them more exposure.
Yeah, so I
Uh,
like that. It's a case of, in most cases, block and delete. And for anybody going through any sort of bullying online, which we've all been subjected to, it's just a case of block and delete and step away. Step away from, even if it's your own family or friends or work colleagues, in any situation, the best thing you can do, I feel, for your own sanity is to step away and allow them, because they'll only move on to another victim if that is
oh,
the case.
and
And
also, make sure that you are commenting positive and favorably with the comments that are positive and favorable. So
yes.
therefore, the people are seeing that, oh, actually, the people who are saying decent things are the ones who are getting greater exposure
Yes,
and greater interaction, and the ones that are saying negative things are just kind of getting ignored.
absolutely. Absolutely. And eventually, hopefully, they may give
They'll,
up. But
they'll suddenly they'll go and pick on someone else, but
yeah, yeah, but at least it's not on your page, as you say. And I like that. So, praise like a child, really, isn't it?
yeah,
It's child behavior. So praise the child or the dog, because we've both
yeah,
got lovely
yeah,
dogs. I met your
yeah.
dog
Yeah.
yesterday online. And just remind of what's your dog's name again, Nick?
Our dog is called Luna. She's a 2.5-year-old black working cocker spaniel, and she did her first full studio session last night with an artist, B. Smith. She was in the studio for the full session, and she did very well.
Oh,
She kept
fantastic. Is she
bringing
on
a
the track?
ball in the middle of a vocal take. She was dropping a ball at the bottom of the microphone stand and looking up at B, going, "Can you play with me now?" It's like, no, can't play with you yet. I mean, so that was fun. Yeah, it was
And is
good.
she there today? Are you able to grab her if I
She's
grab?
not. No, she's in the house.
Here we go. So this is Tinker Nick, and he's just woken up. He's going to give a West End sound designer and producer at
Look
Studio
thrilled.
3507 away.
Look thrilled to have been woken up.
When you've got dogs yourself, you
Yeah,
understand the psychology.
yeah,
Doesn't
absolutely.
he look excited? His eyes
Have
are
you,
open.
have you heard the phrase "let sleeping dogs lie"?
Look at this. And
Yeah,
he's nearly 17. So that is why he's a little sleepy. Because how old's your dog? And what's
2.5.
two
Yeah,
and a half? And
two
it's
and a half.
Luna, is it?
Yeah, we've had her since a puppy, so yeah,
Oh.
magnificent. And so
And
yeah, I'm basically trying to turn her into more of a studio dog, and so that I
oh,
can be mixing or doing sessions, and she can be lying on the sofa, which would be perfect. That's kind of my ideal vision for my future.
well, I was speaking to your wonderful partner Claire yesterday, and she was. she and I grew up together doing musical productions all through our youth, and she's been an amazing friend throughout. And also, your Claire is now in your studio. So just tell me a little bit about what she's doing, because I'm so pleased to hear this.
So, going right back, when Claire and I first met, one of the first things that certainly attracted me to her was that she's a fantastic singer.
Yeah.
So, the first night with friends back at my place in London, we started singing Joni Mitchell songs and stuff, and that was the moment for me that I just kind of went, I think I'm in love.
Ah.
So cut to 24 years because we just had our 24th year anniversary. 24 years later, Claire is now after teaching, after being in stage management, in theatre, and all these different things, working in the cafe, has now realised that actually I can sing. Maybe I should try and do that for a living. So she's starting to go out into the circuit. We're getting a set together. So she's been in the studio. We've been recording the backing tracks so she can go off and do kind of chilled versions of pop classics like, Dancing Queen, but done. If you're having a nice meal and a glass of wine or two, she's the person in the corner who's going to be doing a chilled version of all the songs we all know and love.
Oh,
Uh,
wow. This is amazing. I'm just going to put Tinks to sleep because I want to hear a bit more about this. And just remind me, hang on a sec. Let me just put him to sleep here. There you go, baby. So just let us know what Claire's name is online so that people can connect with her, because I believe she's been doing some recording in your studio
so
3507 as
she
well.
online she has an Insta presence as Claire Rachel.
Yeah,
And so it's just kind of started in the last month or so. So she's just getting a presence, getting a few clips of doing kind of open mic and just getting tested and, and feeling the waters and seeing which ones work from her set and which ones don't work as well. So it's been great. So because again, we can come in here of an evening and we can create the tracks and get her in the studio. And it's music has always been at the heart of who we are as a couple, and we pass that on to our children as well because music was always around at home. Both of them, I've got a real love of music, not necessarily in a practical instrumental way. They both sing fantastically, don't do very much of it, but both love, love, love their music.
and you've got two sons that you're
Sons.
describing, and what's their names?
So Ben is the eldest and he's 23, and Alex is the youngest at 21. They're both living in Liverpool. Ben graduated last year and Alex graduates this year.
Fantastic. And are they doing similar careers, choices to yourself, Nick?
Nothing even close. So Ben did business and marketing and Alex has done international business, but both of them, I think, have thought since then that they wish they'd done something slightly more creative.
Well, it doesn't matter because this is also something I wanted to talk about. Often we go down an education route. I know I got my degree first. Yes, it was in theatre, but dance and drama. But I was passionate about going to drama school, and then I did that afterwards. So very often, as we are growing up, if you like, we follow a particular career path. And every artist I've spoken with has always said you can have two careers. You don't have to just be the entertainer in and out of work. If you, in fact, if you have got a backup, film stars will tell you that as well. If you've got a backup, whether it's a production company or a theatre school, or you're doing something else independently of your entertainment career, then you are in a much better position to sustain your bills as you get older and get your mortgage. Would you agree?
I agree, and I also think that there's extra value in that it's very easy in the creative arts to become slightly insular, and that we're always surrounded by other actors or other musicians or whatever. And actually, by having a second string to your bow in some ways, it means we're out in the outside world. We're seeing those characters. If you're an actor, particularly, we're seeing those other people in the workplace or the other people we meet in our other work that might be inspiration for a character.
Yes.
We're not just learning from other musicians and other actors, we're learning for real human beings that are out there. We're being exposed to, other people's real lives. And ultimately, as a creative person, what we're doing is we're telling stories, and those stories are quite often influenced, if not only by ourselves, but by what we see around us.
Yeah,
So
I like that.
the broader we make our field of vision, whether that's through work or, through research or whatever it happens to be, I think having not just being stuck in one lane is invaluable.
I like that because there's many teachers or nurses. Joe Bram was a nurse originally,
Yeah.
and then you've got teachers who turn into stand-up or other career choices within entertainment, and they then pull on those comedy circumstances and stories, as you say, to tell their story, because that's exactly what we are all doing. It's telling and sharing stories, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, John Bishop, the Liverpudlian,
Oh yeah.
he started work as a salesperson in pharmaceuticals. So, and then he started dabbling because people were saying, actually, you're a funny guy. He started dabbling in comedy. But a lot of his inspiration for his early stand-up was reflecting on the life that he was leading in his professional life in pharmaceuticals. So yeah, having those, having that outside inspiration, I think is very handy. And like you say, on a practical level, it helps pay the bills until, your creative life can get to a stage where it's doing that instead.
Wow, that's incredible. And so, for you personally, obviously, we want to hear about the West End now. Who have you worked with? What have you been doing in the West End? And I also don't want to miss out on you telling me about how you learnt to use a soundboard, because that I thought was one of the most
Still
um,
learning.
interesting stories that I'd love you
Yeah.
to share on today's
Yeah.
channel.
So I worked in the West End for 18 years. I did Les Miserables, Sunset Boulevard, Whistle Down the Wind, Bombay Dreams, Beautiful Game, Jesus Christ Superstar. I was basically Andrew Lloyd Webber's kind of main sound person for about 8 years of that time, which was great experience. I mean, he's, again, talking about pinnacles of musical theatre. You don't get much higher than Lloyd Webber and Cameron Mackintosh. So I was very, very lucky to kind of be in and be kind of first choice as head of sound on those. And that I got to work very early on with some of the best sound designers in the business, people who have, designed Cats and Phantom of the Opera and Les Mis, obviously, and all the big musicals. I was learning firsthand from these people, which then obviously informed my own sound design as I started, designing myself. Um, but also again working with those big names, the Elaine Pages, the Petula Clark, and Betty Buckley, some huge names in musical theatre. How to make them keep them happy and comfortable and supported on stage, but also while not compromising the sound that the audience hear. Because there's no point one person being very happy with the way it sounds and they're on stage, and 2,000 other people out front not being very happy because
Yes,
of the
of
choices we've
course.
made
Yes.
with the sound on the stage. So that tightrope of finding compromise and finding balance with people who are at the top of the game, who are the celebrities, and in some cases the tail that wags the dog. In some cases, but again, that was all fantastic learning. And then, to go on and design for that stage, and in so many different kind of forms. I mean, most recently, I designed the stage show for Horrible Histories, which is a family kids show. Um, and that couldn't be any more different in some ways than the big musicals. Um, but I absolutely adore doing those because it's for families. It's unadulterated fun. More poo and fart jokes than you know what to do with. Uh,
Oh, and of course you're doing the sound. So
doing
how's
all the
that?
sound as the Daily Telegraph reviewed one of the shows. It said Nick Sagar provides the squelchiest and most vomit-inducing sounds on the London stage, which I think is gone on my gravestone. So, but what I love about those shows is that I've seen three generations of family, going to see that. There's the 8-year-old kids, there's their parents, and then there's the grandparents all laughing at the same jokes in the same place. And for a lot of these children, particularly, maybe it's the first time that they've been to theatre. It's why I enjoy doing panto, is that, it's the first exposure a lot of these children get to the live arts and theatre. And if we can make that the most enjoyable, the most fun, then hopefully as they get older, they'll seek out other bits of theatre and things that they might be interested in seeing.
Yes.
So that's as much as I love doing the big musicals, doing the family shows, is fantastically rewarding.
Yeah, it is.
You know.
And I love that you have had this opportunity to work with, as you say, the likes of Elaine Page, and there were other people as well, if I remember right. What other shows
Yeah,
have you got
so
to?
internationally, I've done a lot of work on the kind of more serious side of stuff, more avant-garde theatre. I work a lot with an American theatre director called Robert Wilson, who has worked with everybody from Lady Gaga to Philip Glass to, everybody. Jay-Z, I think, at one point, in an abstract theatre way. And through working with Bob, I've worked with the likes of Willem Dafoe, of is it Platoon, I think, for Full Metal Jacket fame. I've met people like Tom Waits. The show I was just doing in New York, Tom was at, as was Hillary Clinton. It sounds like I'm name dropping, but it's just you've asked me people that I kind of.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah,
so it's, I've been very, very fortunate to meet some well-known people, but going right back to the cogs in the machine is that ultimately we're all there to do one job, which is to serve the peace. Is to,
absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
whether that's the Willem Dafoe's, who is one of the most dedicated actors I think I've ever worked with. His focus and his dedication is incredible.
And is there anybody else in the West End that you've worked with?
Yeah, I worked with John Barrowman. He and Elaine Page were doing Sunset Boulevard together. John was a character. One of the things that I remember about, there's a few things I remember about John, but one of the things that I benefited from the most, John was doing a TV show at the time, a music TV show at the time. And he had to obviously wear a different outfit every week, or that he said otherwise people would phone in or write in and say, "Oh, you were wearing those jeans last week," and blah blah. So constantly, John got a new pair of jeans, Levi 501s, every week, and I happened to be the same size as John. So every week he'd come into the green room and give me a pair of jeans and go, "There you go, that's this week's." And it was like, white jeans and red jeans and green jeans. Thanks very much, John. Thank you very much. So,
Fantastic.
so I've literally been in John Barrowman's pants.
That's an exclusive.
First time I've used that line, but I'm going to use that line again, I think.
That's staying in.
Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. And now, professionally take us to the soundboard, because what was a little story that you shared with me
Yeah.
about how you actually learnt to use the soundboard? Because this is really, really engaging.
So when I got offered the job of Les Miserables, I first started backstage, and all the performers wear little microphone packs and everything. So my first job backstage was to make sure that everyone had the right thing on, and we had to change them. But when I got my promotion, I got promoted to actually mixing the show. And if anyone's seen a large mixing desk, it can look daunting. And the secret actually is it's the same thing, just repeated. So if you know what one line does, then you know what they all do. But that's the secret. Don't tell anyone. But of course, at home to practice, I didn't have one of these at home. Nobody does. Well, I do now, but I don't. But I didn't then. So in my flat in London, I laid out the kitchen table with pieces of tape and twopence pieces in the layout of the console. So each of the twopence pieces was a fader. Would correspond to a different microphone or a different character. So I would sit there with a recording of the show and the script and literally push these twopence pieces up and down to get the mechanics of when the microphones were on and when they were off, and because there's some big scenes in Les Mis, ABC Cafe, the Paris scene, just the opening,
Barricade is
the
huge.
barricade.
It's huge. Yeah.
It's huge. So obviously I had to learn the mechanics of getting these on and off. And as I say, this is in the days before digital consoles, which help you do a bit of that, or a lot of that. Literally, if you needed 16 faders up, you needed 16 fingers. So working at the mechanics of doing the show, and that was on my kitchen table in London with twopence pieces. And the next thing you know, I'm mixing probably one of the most world famous shows in the world. Thank you, twopence pieces and kitchen table.
And also to your talent, which I have to say undoubtedly got you the role. And how did you get that position? You see, as an actor, we know how to audition, for the world of theatre.
Yep.
But how do sound engineers coming up the ranks, and designers like yourself and other technicians, how do they actually get that exposure and obviously audition, if you like, or however you phrase it?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think it was luck in some ways, but obviously, I think we make our own luck to an extent. And I'd been working on as a crew on Starlight Express, and
Oh,
actually, I got that job because of someone I went to drama school with. So it's kind of who you know. And she'd phone me up saying, "Oh, there's a job going as crew on Starlight. Would you be interested?" Well, yeah, great, you know. So that was who you know. But while I was there, I got chatting to the head of sound on Starlight, and saying, "How did you get into this? I've done, bits of sound in the past and music and blah blah." And he said, "Oh, you should go and meet the sound designer, Martin Levan." So I went to meet Martin, and he explained kind of what the role was and everything. He said, we've got nothing going at the moment, but why don't you go and see one of my shows, Phantom of the Opera?" So I went to see Phantom, and the head of sound there, Janice Girl, fantastic, fantastic woman, and a real mentor for me. We met and I watched the show. We got on well, and that was that. She said, "Hope you enjoyed it." Blah blah. Anyway, 2 days later, I got a phone call from her saying, "I'm meeting up with a friend of mine tonight. Do you fancy joining us for a drink? I think she might be a very interesting person for you to meet." Went and had a drink. Anyway, the person I was meeting was a woman called Mandy Hare, who was the head of sound on Les Miserables. And we were chatting for maybe half an hour, and Mandy said, "We're looking for a number three sound. Would you be interested in the job?" And
wow.
2 weeks later, I was on Les Miserables, completely out of my comfort zone, having never done anything like this at all. So I can only assume that it was the way I talked passionately about theatre, the way I conducted myself, I guess. So I think to anyone, yes, there is a certain amount of luck, but I think if you are a genuine person,
Yeah,
you are enthusiastic, you look like someone that is prepared to learn and be part of a team. I think that can be very attractive to people who are looking for, someone to join a team, particularly an established team. And if you're lucky enough to have someone, as Mandy was, who saw in me something,
yeah.
that thought, "I'd like to be part of the nurture of that."
That's lovely. So what I'm hearing you saying, yes, obviously you had your accreditation with Mount View Drama School, which is, in my opinion, a very, very, a wonderful opportunity for everybody coming up the ranks. I would always recommend, if you can, to go to drama school to get that professional training, to also work out, as you did, Nick, um, insecurities, our
Mhm.
own character flaws. Doesn't have to be perfect first time, because when you break all that down and then you have the professional wherewithal emotionally and practically, you're then in a more balanced position, which is, I've heard you say the word balance quite a lot, because you're literally doing the balance of the sound in the theatre, aren't you? So you need to be emotionally balanced and secure and not in a panic state, so that you can actually, if something happens and a thunderclap occurs at the wrong time.
Accidents do happen like that. I drowned the student revolution in on Les Mis by having the wrong sound effect loaded, but that's another story.
I hope it wasn't one from Horrible Histories.
No, it wasn't. No, no. The river that's supposed to drown Javert drowned the student revolution at the end of the barricade scene because I was a sound effect ahead. Yeah.
And you see, even though that happened, I am sure afterwards, it's the things that go wrong. People always said to me, when I was running my own children's theatre school for 10 years, Cathy, I love coming. It doesn't have to be perfect. I love it when it all goes wrong." And
Completely.
so the children forget to come on stage or whatever. And so some people kind of revel in the excitement of live theatre.
I
Anything
think
can
that's
happen.
Yeah, I think that's it. That's what makes it different from going to the cinema, is
Yes.
because it's not the same every day and something can go wrong, you
Yes.
know. And invariably does go wrong, just the audience don't see 90% of the things that go wrong or they're well covered up. But those moments when and I still get it in theatre now. I'm looking, thinking, I call it Thunderbirds time. In the next 2 hours, anything could happen.
Yeah.
Anything could happen. And I love that for theatre.
And I think that's important. So was it Mandy, the lady that took you under?
Yeah, Mandy. Yeah,
So, huge thank you to Mandy, because we all need somebody to take us under their wing and support us and guide us. And then when we come up the ranks, Nick, which is precisely the description of Mandy that you are now in that position of, because you are
absolutely.
now in your own studio, which is amazing. I've heard the sound quality. I've watched some of your extracts on multiple socials, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. And if ever there was anybody out there internationally wanting to record any music, or you also do audio books, anything like that, do get in touch with Nick because I highly recommend him. You've heard his professionalism. I can hear it enthusing from you, and you're still of that high professional ilk. And that's that is the longevity of your career. If you drop the ball and you become lazy, or it becomes easy, or your passion fades, that's usually when people tend to step away from this industry. But that has never happened with you. As you say, you've gone full circle, and you've got a plethora of talents there. So anybody coming to you is absolutely in safe hands. And you are the Mandy of Studio 3507. Oh, Mandy.
I mean, it's been fantastic, particularly in the West End now. I mean, there's two or three sound operators in the West End who started their careers out with me on my, on my team, and
Wow.
then they've gone on to go through the ranks and, and be up there at the kind of top and the pinnacle now of their games. And that's I love seeing that, because I do feel that it's my responsibility to kind of give back and help the next generation. It's kind of a legacy thing as well. And I feel that particularly keenly with the artists that I'm working with now, and a lot of them are very young. A lot of them are in the kind of early 20s, and you wouldn't necessarily think that a music producer in their 50s, mid 50s, would necessarily have a lot that was current for those people, for those artists. But I think that sometimes bringing that wealth of experience about songwriting, about all the music that I've listened to over all the years that I've been listening to music, can really help new and emerging artists blend what they're hearing and their kind of genre and vibe of music with something that's got a little bit more solidity and age behind it,
Yeah,
really.
absolutely. And the thing is, you are, as I am, young at heart. And when you are following passions that light you up on a day-to-day basis, and you are a workaholic, and a perfectionist, and you want everything to be of a high caliber, Nick, then people are still attracted to that. It's, as I said, it's when you switch off, that's when people are sort of less engaged. And you literally don't switch off in that studio. You are 100% behind the artist. Just share with us what you offer when artists come to you.
We offer everything from basic recording. I mean, I had someone in a couple of days ago who was in recording a couple of tracks, because she feels that she wants to express herself as a singer. She's always sung, but had never done any recording before, never done anything like that. So wanted to come and try out, and she absolutely nailed a couple of Amy Winehouse covers. It's like she was, like she'd been recording all her life. So we go from that. I've had an 83-year-old in doing Frank Sinatra tracks,
Wow.
and then from that all the way up to full songwriting collaboration. I'm working with a country artist, a signed country artist, B. Smith, who's been signed to a label in Louisiana. And we start off with a blank piece of paper,
Yeah.
and we go all the way through to a finished song that was one of them was played on the radio in Nashville the week before last. So she's done like 40 radio interviews in and around Nashville and Tennessee and all that. So that's really taking some traction. So it's the full gamut, and audiobooks. I did an audiobook with a BBC radio presenter about how to stop drinking. Um, I listened to some of that, but I said, Sharon, I said, even if 1% of this book lands on me, then you've got a bestseller on your hands.
I was going to say, by the end of the audio book, could you put your red wine
Yeah,
down?
and I did. I was sitting there really questioning my life choices.
That's fantastic. So, a whole plethora of different artists and professionals utilizing the studio, including your beloved Claire. And what's she going out as again? What's her stage name?
Rachel.
Claire Rachel, and that's Claire with an I.
And Rachel, oh yeah, Rachel.
Yeah, so that's perfect. And if anybody wants to get in touch with either of you, regarding bookings ahead, they can do so. And you're going to share your details at the end of today. So you've got a lot of wealth of talent there that you've shared with us. And I love that, because so many people, particularly in children today in schools, they may have siblings that love going on the stage, but they themselves don't want to go on the stage. They want to do the sound, they want to do the set. set. So tell me about the set design when you were at Mount View. What was it that you learnt there?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think, as I said earlier, going back to that idea of making worlds for people to exist in, I found that kind of that notion of creating a stage set that has to kind of meet a lot of very specific criteria. Obviously, you read through a script and you say, okay, well, this one's set in, a living room, and this one's set on a railway station, and whatever. So you have to create something that can fulfill all those different roles, quite often to a very tight budget. So you can't just have a beautiful mock-up of a railway station, a beautiful mock-up of of a front room or whatever it happens to be. You've got to find creative ways of using that space. And I think that also comes into music is that, we haven't all got a 60-piece orchestra. So how do you get that feeling, that emotion across creatively? Um, so I love doing set design, and ironically, I think I see sound in a lot of ways. I see the soundscape and the musical orchestration visually in many ways, and I think maybe that's where the set design and the music side came in. There must be some side of my brain somewhere that sees things in a very visual sense, and that includes the music.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. And how did you cope yourself in this industry in the West End? And what brought you back to the North? Obviously, you said about the lockdown situation, and that was the practical, circumstance that returned you up here. But what I want to know is emotionally, Nick, having been brought up in the Ram's Head establishment with your fantastically supportive parents and family, you then were exposed to all these different brilliant artists, as we said earlier, from the television. You then progressed to drama school. You then went through the ranks of the West End, and you're now in your own studio. Have you anything to share emotionally on that torrent of a journey that drove you or compromised you, and things that you may have learnt from to support the health side of this channel with anybody going through any personal insecurities and circumstance?
Yeah, I think one of the big turning points in my life, I think, was when, well, they coincided, was when my father died, and when Claire and I were had our first child. So I'd had a very successful career in the West End, as we've discussed, and then my father died, and I was hundreds of miles away in London. I was there when he died, but I was still, as far as supporting my mother was concerned, it felt like a long way away. And I'd been offered, I was doing Bombay Dreams in town, and and Andrew Lloyd Webber had offered me the next show, Love Never Dies. And with my dad dying, and with Ben, being a young baby at the time, I was starting to think, is this it now? Is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? Do I want to change and maybe try something different, but predominantly to be there to support my mum? And it happened at the right time. And I think, and it was scary because, I was really well paid in the West End. I was at the top of my game. I was probably regarded as the kind of top sound person in the West End at the time. So the thought of giving all that up and then, relocating back to the Northwest, a place that I swore when I left at 18 I'd never come back and live in.
Oh, we all do that, Nick.
All do that. All do that.
We're drawn back because I want to say on this channel, I've spoken to others from Lancashire. It is a beautiful place to be, and often you don't appreciate. And there's lots of parts of the UK that are equally beautiful, but you often don't appreciate your sort of homecomings and where you're from and your surrounds. Perhaps sometimes until you've left them. And we're a friendly bunch, aren't we, in Lancashire?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the thing I hated the most when I left is that everyone wanted to know everyone's business, and it was the thing that I missed. I realised when I'd gone down to London, but it was having children. I thought, well, I want them to grow up kind of knowing that and knowing that feeling of being part of a community and stuff. And I loved London, absolutely adored London, but neither of us really wanted to bring up children in London.
Yeah.
Wanted to give them the opportunity if they ever wanted to move there, then great. When they were older, that was their choice as I had done, or as Claire and I had done, because we met in London. But actually, to grow up knowing what a field looks like, knowing what a cow looks like, being able to go and ride your bike out in the street and do all those, fantastic things. So all those things kind of coincided with my dad dying, and me, I guess, having been burnt out, I was very lucky that I'd gone from show to show to show to show to show throughout my career, and I was probably feeling a bit burnt out, to be honest, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And so the thought of doing the same thing again with, different show, um, and that just continuing, I think it just happened to coincide, and thought, and as I say, it was scary to go, actually, we're going to leave all this behind, we're going to start again
Yes.
in London. I mean, fortunately, house prices in London are so astronomical that effectively, when we sold the house, it's a bit like someone giving you a suitcase full of money and going, "Thanks for living here." So that you can sort of go, "Oh, all right then, great."
Absolutely.
Well, I'm rich for about 3 seconds. Then but then moving back was a challenge in the sense that I had to re-establish myself. I'd been a very big fish in a very small pond, and of course, moving back to the northwest, I was a very small fish in a very big pond. So it took probably a year to re-establish my sound design work up here. Um, but I've not regretted a single moment of it, because it's a slightly different pace of life, obviously, but I realize that there is more to life than just, working at that level constantly, constantly, constantly. I loved it, but actually, like all great things, it has to come to an end. Change inevitably happens, and it can happen in spite of you when, external circumstances, happen. It means you have to have a change, like, maybe as happened with you. Or you get to choose, actually, I think now I'm ready for a change. And if you're in a lucky enough position to be able to make that change, as hard as it might be,
Yeah.
then trusting those instincts and again, following your passion and just going, right, I'm going to make this work. Somehow I'll make this work.
And I love that because what you're saying is, like in my case, obviously it was made for me because I collapsed at 39. But in your case, you understood my career because obviously we're out front, so there's a lot more physical demands, but you are also mentally challenged, demands on you with the sound system, which at the end of the day, the brain can only cope for a certain amount of time with such high stimuli because the theatres, as you and I have worked in, they're full of high stimuli. Sound and light is constant noise. So at some point, you've got to say to yourself, well, where's the balance? And because you'd had your first child, Ben, of course, with Claire, you were then in a position where you thought, right, I've got a reason now. I'm raising a family. Where do I want that to be? And you looked around and you knew that you wanted it to be, surrounded by fields and nature and various other things here, specifically in Lancashire. And what I love about what you're saying is you're talking a lot about balance. And I talk about this in my book, balance in all things, because if you're out of balance, your brain and body is out of balance, your career, work life, home life are out of balance, something is going to crack at the end of the day. And if, as you say, if you don't make that change, the change will just come to you. So, would you agree with that, Nick?
Yeah, completely. I mean, I think as you alluded to earlier, it's ironic that my job as, a sound engineer, music producer is all about balance. It's finding the right balance between the drums and the voice and the guitar. And actually that's my ethos on life in general. There's times when you can push things a little bit louder for dramatic effect, and other times because you push something louder, you need to just rebalance that and bring everything down. It's like the roller coaster idea, isn't it? Is that we only appreciate the drop because there's been this slow and steady rise up to the top and the anticipation, and then there's a drop. But if we were constantly dropping, then the thrill would go. I mean, we'd be terrified, but the thrill would go pretty quickly. If we were constantly rising, then the thrill would go quickly. It's the fact that we get that balance, and that's a sine wave. That's a sine wave, which is a sound. It's we need to have a little bit of those ups and downs. Hopefully, not too extreme ups and downs because that can be bilious. But to have that undulation, that's flatlining. That's kind of not really alive. But
Yeah.
to be able to go up and down, as long as they're in equal balance, as long as the lows are as balanced as the highs and not too extreme,
You
I
know what
think.
mine was? It was
Yeah, yours was, yeah, yeah.
I was so excitable, you see, that this is what I say to ME patients: you cannot live your life in the fast lane at that top. Look what happens to celebrities off the television. Their careers, sadly, with burnout or other, sickness, or different circumstances. If you are living your life in the fast lane and you're not having that rebalance to reset yourself, to meditate, to take good care of your health, to rest, and you're always on a high, then unfortunately something's going to give. And
Totally.
that's
Use
not
the
just,
analogy of the fast lane. If you're driving at 90 miles an hour down the fast lane, you're going to run out of petrol really quickly.
yeah, that's exactly it. And I
You know what
think
I mean?
that's a really good analogy. And if you're not putting enough petrol in the tank as well,
Yeah,
because you're fueled by adrenaline, as I was, then
absolutely.
again, it's rebalancing everything. And the other thing I wanted to ask you as well was harmony. So we're talking about music in this, in a psychological format here, and harmony, and what they call disquiet or disharmony, in terms of relationships with other people. What I'm intrigued by is, what do you think as a musician, combining music with psychology, Nick? What do you think is a good analogy for people who perhaps get on with the right frequency with some but not others? What's
Yeah.
your analogy there?
I have an entire theory, the fact that we as human beings, well, everything actually resonates at a particular frequency. That frequency may change throughout the day, from time to time, or whatever. So we all have a fundamental frequency which we resonate at. So when we meet somebody and their frequency is resonating, it may be harmonious. um, interval of, or a harmony effectively. And we're instantly like that person. We get along with that person because we're making a harmonious sound, for want of a better word. However, we may meet someone else whose resonant frequency is discordant to ours. Doesn't mean to say that that person is necessarily a bad person, because they may harmonize with somebody else very well. But we at that time, at that moment, may not harmonize with that other person. And I think we sense this when we walk into a room. If there's been discord or a lot of disharmony between the people in the room, I think we know that. We walk in and immediately go, oh, something's
Feel it,
a
can't
little
you?
bit off here, because you feel the disharmony of people's resonant frequencies. But equally, you can walk into a space, and I think this is why people are attracted to churches. I'm not a religious kind of formal religious follower. I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. But I
Yeah.
think one of the beauties about churches is that people tend to be so focused on one idea that their resonant frequencies tend to be slightly more harmonious.
What you're saying is, Nick, that people walking into a church, they have that literally under one roof, rather perhaps like a theatre
Yeah,
experience.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
you're going into a community, which is what this channel's about, bringing the commune back into community. You're going into a particular space where you are all lit up in on the same frequency, because you all believe the same narrative, or you're all there to
Focused
celebrate
on the same
together.
thing. Yeah.
Or a disco, for example, which
Yeah. Oh,
obviously today,
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
don't think they call them discos anymore.
Clubs, I think they call them. Yeah. Rave.
I'm in the wrong generation.
I think even rave may be outdated now, to be fair.
So those are the types of places where, yeah, and a disco or whatever you call it today is exactly that description, because you're all dancing, feeling adrenaline to the frequency of the music. Would you agree?
100%.
Describe that
Yeah.
euphoric
And
feeling.
Faithless, the band Faithless said it beautifully. This is my church. This is where I heal my hurts. And it's about being in a club, and I think for many people it's a similar feeling. It's that unification of people all focused on the same thing, whether that's the beat, whether it might be a sermon or whatever it happens to be, and everyone's resonant frequencies kind of being in tune with each other.
Yeah.
Is magical, and you get that from theatre. You get that from moments, you get that moments from great anguish. I remember when Princess Diana died, and the entire country, the entire world was in anguish, and there was something about that resonance and that focus
That linked everybody
time
together.
that linked everyone together.
And the same circumstance occurred when the 2020 circumstances
course, yeah.
occurred. And everybody's frequency, unfortunately, it was the opposite of the Diana frequency where everybody was on the same page. There was a discord, I feel, and a disconnection from each other, literally, families, friends, and everything. We were pulled apart, and therefore it created a discord and disharmony,
Mhm.
if you like, and fear. So
Yeah.
fear, as you say, can create discord in itself. A horror film that you go and watch at the cinema can create that disharmony, that disquiet, and bring up feelings of anxiety, let's say. And what you're saying is music can also do that, and theatre. It can bring those roller coaster symbols and signs that you've described. You share with me a bit more about that.
Yeah, I think, a lot of the time we think that theatre's there to entertain, but I've done theatre that's there to shock and
Yeah.
make people feel uncomfortable. A lot of the work I do with Robert Wilson is a mixture of both. So Bob is a genius at creating moments of serenity followed by moments of shock. So that the audience never get to really settle into one moment. When you just think, oh, this is really lovely. This is very, it's a beautiful moment. Then all of a sudden he'll do something that literally sends everyone's frequencies all over the place and kind of goes, oh, what's going on? And then he'll do that for a certain amount of time and then it'll come back to something else.
Well,
So,
that resonates with Anthony Artaud, who I'm sure you probably studied at
yeah,
Preston
yeah.
College as I did in theatre studies, who does exactly that, the shock factor. And what Anthony Artaud says, and I share in my book, his theory, which you understand, is the theatre of the absurd. So if you are shocked in theatre, whether you're on the stage, whether it's the sound, whether it's the blood splats or the violence or whatever, his view was that if you get all of these emotions out onto the theatre space as actors in a what's the word, in a structured format, that you would eventually be able to release all of those emotions in psychology, because he worked alongside Sigmund Freud's theories. If you can get all of that out onto the stage, release those emotions onto the stage, you're less likely to do them by day.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is what the Greeks did that. It was to sort of portray the full gamut of the human experience.
Yeah.
So that we can, and ironically we're still doing that. We still kind of, with all the celebrity TV and the Love Islands, what we're doing is we're kind of doing that through those experiences and watching those as well. As much as I haven't got a taste for that kind of TV and that kind of sensationalism, it's still in the same vein.
Yeah, because it's raw, and you are watching somebody's real emotions, is what you're saying, in all of these celebrity programs, Big Brother, or whether it be exercise programs or whatever, anything that brings people together on live television, doing challenges and causing, as you say, discord, because human beings need their own space as much as they enjoy being with others. Would you agree with that?
Indeed, yeah, absolutely. Sadly, we need all the aspects of the human experience, I think, to thrive. If we were just content all the time, as Shakespeare said, if all the world were playing holidays, then to sport would be as tedious as to work. But when
Yeah.
it seldom comes, it greatly wished for comes, and nothing pleaseth more than rare accidents. I've got to get my Shakespeare quote out every now and again. So basically, if you're doing the nice stuff all the time, you don't appreciate them anymore. It's only when you get the not so nice stuff that you start appreciating the good stuff.
And I can speak wholeheartedly from that standpoint personally, because, like I said, I was an excitable character, and I always saw everything as very positive, very excitable, very energetic, on the high frequency all the time. And then when I had this enormous drop at 39 and I'm bedbound, obviously you're resonating then in a very different frequency. But what was brilliant for me, not just losing 11 years, that's certainly not brilliant, but what's been brilliant is learning to be the spectator and not the performer, and watching the world around me. And something I never did, I never had time to sit still, to read a book, to do anything that was self sort of gratifying, if that makes sense. I was
Yeah.
constantly giving all of my time and energy, which I loved, but without that balance, for anybody coming up the ranks, something is going to give. And if you push yourself as a workaholic, as I was with 2 or 3 businesses, to the extreme, something's going to give. Would you agree?
Totally. And I think it's easily done if we feel that we define ourselves by what we do rather than who we are. I think, it's very easy, particularly if you are a passionate, energetic, vibrant person and you're doing something that you love doing, that you feel that you're defined by that. And if you're not doing that, then you have no definition. Who are you without your job? And oh, I'm Cathy, the entertainer, or I'm Nick, the sound designer, or whatever it happens to be. Having the strength to go, actually, no, I do those things because of who I am. I am not who I am because I do those things.
I love that. I think you're excellent at psychology, Nick.
Very much. I dated a psychotherapist for a long time. I had no choice. Uh,
Well, that explains it. But no, the main thing is you really, that's your own innate wisdom. But I love how you share it with music, the frequency levels. Because I've had my Uncle Peter on the channel on a previous episode, and he shared playing the Wurlitzer
mhm.
organ at the Blackpool Tower
Oh,
and things. I
fantastic.
mean, he's just a genius and a genius pianist as well. And he obviously talked about being inspired by Les Dawson, who plays or he plays some of Les Dawson's music, if that
All the
makes
right
sense.
notes, but not necessarily in the right order. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's your Eric Walker, but Les Dawson is the going off on keys. So again, music frequency. So if you are off key, or as a singer myself, if you sing off key, it's an unnatural frequency. And what I hear you're saying is that if we look at our relationships with others, one person may get along on the same frequency, on the same chord, or sound or key as somebody else. Um, but somebody else may not be their key player, for example. So
Indeed.
I like what you said about that. So somebody may be, you describe it, what they could
Yeah,
be.
I think, like I said earlier, is that if we don't necessarily get on with someone, we are discordant with someone, it doesn't necessarily mean to say that other person is in any way wrong. They may have a harmony with somebody else, and that's the wonderful thing, is that we've hopefully all got somebody out there that we are harmonious with. The slight tricky thing with it is I don't necessarily think that our frequency stays the same all the time. I think it can become more complex, or it can become purer. It can shift if we have a change of life experience, which means that maybe the people that we are attracted with a small a, may change throughout our lives as well. And the people that we were very close to when we were growing up, because we were kind of running at roughly one particular frequency, may not be the people that we harmonize with as we get later in life. Or we found other frequencies. We've gone from a single note to a chord ourselves. We've
Yes.
become more nuanced and more detailed. And so we end up looking for people whose chord works with ours.
I love that, because what I hear you saying is um, it's not a person's fault from either side. It is that their frequency at that particular time isn't working
Yeah, it's not a
together.
match. Yeah,
And
effectively.
it's also possibly to do with, as we know, discrepancies in belief systems. So if everybody, as you just described earlier, is going into the church with the same belief system within that building, then they're going to have a more harmonious connection with each other. Same in the theatre, if they all like the same production. So what you're saying is find your frequency, but also work out what your own frequency is. And for me personally, that has been the making of me, because by no longer being fueled by adrenaline, by having to learn in order to recover, because it's the sympathetic nervous system that is dysregulated in ME. So having to learn to calm down the sympathetics and work in the parasympathetic, something I've never done. But these last 11 years, I've had to learn to do it. And actually, I want to share with everybody, if you learn to read, learn to rest, learn to meditate, and balance, if you are working on stage or doing sound design as you are, or production in a studio as you are, switch off that music, find your downtime, find your solitude, because I can literally, Nick, with my electromagnetic sensitivity, I can literally relax with Tinker by a tree in the woods and I can feel my whole body and my nervous system go do-do-do-do-do-do.
Yeah.
And that is something only very few people can feel, because it means that it's a frequency sort of almost been released, and it's perhaps, I don't know, perhaps electricity being released from the body, who knows. And my little dog feels it as well. He does a little ah.
Nice. Yeah.
It's incredible, don't you think?
Yeah.
And
Oh, completely.
he now
Yeah.
tree hugs with me. So
Yeah.
every single day, Nick, without fail, that's something I want to share, particularly if we're working with music and electronics on a day-to-day basis. I believe our human body can heal from almost anything, with given the right tools and frequencies to work within. And so I really want to commend that anybody that's going into the field of work that you're in or I am in takes that downtime, takes your advice today and the things that we've shared, because in doing so, the brain needs to rest. And that's something that we think we are resting if we're going on social media. We think we're resting if we sat still watching a television. We're not. Rest and meditation, as I've learnt, is nothing. Silence. And
Mm.
how many people, because I certainly couldn't meditate 11 years ago, there's just no way I could sit still. I couldn't sleep, never mind meditate. But how many people need to learn that skill in order to perhaps overcome personal anxieties, personal depression, personal um, traumas and trials and tribulations? Because I believe we are the best therapists for ourselves. I believe that we have the answers, they're within us, and they may be different, and you may have a different modality to somebody else to heal, but those answers will not come by running away or by drinking, which your author
Mhm.
who's reading his book in your studio was saying. These are all distractions to life's noise, really. And actually, when we genuinely get into the meditation sense, and it took me years to get into that, but then I've been in, alone in my house for a long time, for many years. But for most people who don't have the opportunity that I've got to decompress, I would highly recommend, and I'm sure you would as well, taking that time, as you just said, take your ear pods out, because I was always walking around the block before, or jogging with Tinker, with pods in my ears, listening to sound and music. And again, it's more electrical stimuli. There's a lot of electrics out there today. We want to shut those down, shut the phone off, shut the television down, and take good care of ourselves. Would you agree?
Yeah, completely. And being out in nature, or just having a moment, even if it is reading a book or whatever, but just having a moment for doing something just for yourself, just for that sense of calm, that sense of contrast. And ironically, I mean, for the people who are workaholics, it's easy to think that doing nothing actually is doing nothing, but particularly in the creative arts, actually moments of stillness, moments of walking in nature, stuff's going in via osmosis all the time. It's the stuff that, informs your writing and informs your how you are when you walk into the office tomorrow morning or whatever it is. It's gone in by osmosis. So it's not inactivity, I don't believe. It's it's a difference of activity, and it's that contrast of activity that gives the greatest reward. And especially if you don't have outside stimuli either, you're reliant purely on your own perception of your surroundings. And if you tune into that and go, I'm a small part of this very big world, and I'm really happy, because I've got no idea how that tree works, and I've got no idea what's going to be around that corner. But actually, that's fine. That's good because I don't have to be in control of any of that stuff.
And that's really good that you say about being in control. I think when you're in high achieving professions such as entertainment, you feel an expectation to be always on your game, and potentially for both of us perfectionists, top of the game. Actually, what you need to do to decompress is get back to nature, meditate, sit in stillness. The best ideas, use crystals, whatever it is that allows you to deep breathe and get that proper level of oxygen back into the nervous system. Because when you are in a frenetic state, particularly when you're in high sound, it makes you quite frenetic and excitable, as I experienced. You need to then decompress and find that balance. And once you do that, your speaking voice is slower. You're not all on this high, which I used to be, all very excited. Your speaking voice is slower. And as you've just highlighted, you then resonate on a different frequency, and people are then more able to communicate with you because if their frequency's
Yeah,
high, they need somebody on a low frequency and vice versa.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's nice to have excitable high frequencies, which is often the case in our profession. Oh, I did this today. Oh, so did I. And that's excitement. But what you also want to do is to be able to sustain conversations without overstimulating the nervous system,
Indeed.
because that's longevity of life and good health as well.
Back to the roller coaster thing, the idea of, yes, going down, reaching the top and going down is exciting and it's full on, but actually it's that moment of peace and that calm going up to that point, which is equally as important. You can't have that without the rise.
You can't have the highs
Can't
without
have the
the
high
lows. And
without the
what
low.
you said was if the highs are extreme, then the low is going to be even more
Of course.
extreme.
Yeah, of
I,
course.
I used to think and say to people, but I'm just so excited. But what I didn't realize was, excitement should actually be a little bit more balanced.
I'm so excitable is actually what
Yeah.
it was.
And I
Yeah,
was,
yeah.
children at school with me said you were just, you were like a rocket, which was brilliant for high achievers and getting good grades. But actually, and more paper, I was that annoying one at the front that always wanted more paper. It didn't mean I was writing anything intelligent, Nick. It just meant I was writing a lot of words.
10,000 words for a 2,000 word essay. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And I describe in my book as well, I wrote 20,000 words on my dissertation that only required 8.5. So there you go. And what I'm realizing is, and then ended up on a drip. So what I'm realizing is finding that balance, learning to be harmonious and at peace will actually give you, I have found, many more ideas. Most of my best ideas I want to share today have been sat by a tree meditating. And yet, had you asked me 11 years ago to sit still and think of your next idea, I would have said, I don't have time. So my rest time was a Zumba class because
Yeah.
I had to have a distraction. And that, therefore, is what are you being distracted by? Why are you drinking X amount of alcohol? Why are you dancing in a nightclub or a disco all night, every night? Why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you workaholic as I was? What are you running away from? And then, as you say, you go down the roller coaster. You then get the moment of stillness, tip your toys out of the pram. Great opportunity to do so. Work out why you are the way you are. And then, as you said, you can then climb slowly back up, but be on a more balanced par where you can be excited, but you can also rest. Would you
I,
agree?
I think sometimes people who have got very active and very creative minds think the only way of quieting that down is by going another step up. Effectively, is by doing something slightly more that will just suppress it. So alcohol is the classic for that. Oh, I just need to relax. I just need to quiet my brain down. I'll have a few drinks and then my brain will be dulled down. It's a stimulant. It has the opposite effect.
Yeah.
So
And stops you
actually,
sleeping as well, doesn't it? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, so I find that when I'm at kind of that level and I'm really, it's full on, I have to just get out and just, kind of go, right, I'm going out for, half an hour or whatever, and just sit and look at the clouds. I mean, I'll sit outside at 2 o'clock in the morning if it just means that I'm just having a moment of decompression and
So if
going,
anybody sees you sat outside
yeah,
at 2 o'clock in the morning,
not trying to break in. First of all, I live here. Secondly, I'm just having a moment. And if the stars are out, then even better because that puts everything into perspective. Uh,
fantastic. Fantastic. Well, I hate to wrap up today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope you've enjoyed it as well, Nick.
thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure, and thank you for sharing what you have because you've not just got wisdom on the frequency of working at Studio 3507 in Penwitham, and such innate wisdom behind the psychology behind music as well, which they do go quite hand in glove, I would
Oh, yeah,
say.
inseparable.
because there's emotion involved, and that's a whole new podcast. So you've got emotional connection to your art, you've got a wealth of talent and experience in so many different forms that we've heard today. And if anybody wants to get in contact with you, Nick, for coming to your studio, anybody globally, or indeed wants to learn a little bit more from you about opening their own studio, let's say in another part of the world, what advice can you give, and where can people find you?
People can find me at 3507.co.uk. Also on Insta at 3507 Studio. My theatre sound design website is nicksagar.com. Yeah, I'm always very, very happy to speak to people, particularly if they are just starting out and need a bit of advice, whether that be about music, whether about setting up studios, because that can be a complex minefield. But yeah, the most important thing, the parting message from me is just do it. Just go out and do it. Find your own voice, tell your own story, irrespective of what everyone else says. My mum and my sister told me, "Oh, don't sing. You're not very good at singing." And if I'd have taken that advice early on, I probably wouldn't do half the things that I do now. So just go out there and do what makes your heart beat, sometimes faster and certainly sometimes slower.
Fantastic. I want to share today that tree hugging for your animals as well, putting his paw against the tree next to my hand. If he didn't like it or feel it, because animals are so sensitive, then he would remove his hand, but he feels it and he goes, oh, and that's,
But
of
all of nature resonates.
course
All
it
of
does.
nature resonates.
Of course
It's
it does.
and I think that's why it's so appealing to us. It's the same thing though as being self-aware enough to recognize, if you say, your own frequency and in your relationships with people, is being aware that that is happening to start with. If you have an awareness of that, then you obviously have an awareness that it's happening all around you.
Yes.
It's in every single thing, whether it's in it can even be in a cup as much as in a tree. Everything has its resonance and everything, we've all got our favorite mugs. Why have we got our favorite mugs?
Yeah.
No, is it the color? Is it the whatever? But all of those things are resonating something to us that makes them our favorite, and we gravitate towards those because we feel a sense of harmony
Yes.
with with those things. I mean, I could easily spend 24 hours a day in the studio or in a theatre or whatever, but one of the beauties of having Luna now is that I get to go on dog walks, and I made it a rule to myself that I wouldn't listen to music, I wouldn't listen to podcasts, I wouldn't use my phone, I wouldn't do any of those things while we were walking. It would just be myself, Luna, and the outdoors, and anyone I happened to say hello to, or whoever was walking with us, because I need that time to be able to just, like you say, switch off.
And decompress.
No.
Yeah.
Not listen to anything, actually. That's the big thing, is because my analytical brain, whenever I hear music, I'm hearing it on an emotional level, but I'm also hearing it on an analytical level, on a technical level, and analyzing every note. And, oh, right, okay, they used the violin at that point and blah, blah. I don't get that with the wind. I just hear, oh, the wind sounds great going through the trees, or not even that. I'm just aware of being outside, and and the colors and the shape and the feel and the temperature of the wind and all those kind of things. It's a different
You're in
level.
the moment, which is what your job in the West End was, to bring people into a magical space to believe that the wind is
Totally.
real in the magic of the theatre.
Yeah,
So what you're saying is what I've had to learn. As I say, I was literally dancing through life. I was in the fast lane. I wasn't looking left and right. And now I don't have a choice because I've got vestibular damage, which drummers get. I also play the drums, but drummers can get from too much of a sound wave, constantly on stage and loud music all the time. And so as that heals, so go out and let your heart sing, is what you're saying.
absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, Nick, thank you so much for today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. And thank you for being with Tinker and I on the Catherine Vandome and Me podcast. And we will give you a little wave and say goodbye.
I hope you're on a royalty there. He's the star of the
I
show.
do as well. Lots of love, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye, Nick.
Let's, Cathy. Thanks a lot.